While all you losers were getting excited over a Rain DLC trailer, I was playing the Nioh 2 Darkness in the Capital DLC, and let me tell you, the fist weapon in this game is way cooler than Rain's. Rain, more like Roman Rain. But honestly, this DLC is fantastic. First, I may as well talk about what I think about the game itself and the previous DLC. I adored Nioh 1. And so I was really excited for Nioh 2, and that's the game I've played the most this year. It's absolutely fantastic, and I don't normally like Souls-type games. I don't think there's a single one of them that is perfectly balanced where nothing is ever bullshit. If someone says it's always challenging but fair, they are fucking lying. There are always bits that are just absolute bullshit. The fire wheels in this game can suck a dick, legitimately, and so could those snake ladies. But it's a fantastic game, and I just really enjoy playing it. Every time I'm reaching level cap, I'm about to get I'm almost at level cap. The game has an expansion with more levels added. I think on release, the level cap was like 250, and now it's like 500. So daft like that. But yeah, I've not played much of other games this year. I've mostly just played Nioh 2. It's that good. So it's probably going to be my game of the year. You know, spoiler alerts for you guys when I do that video in January. You know, assuming the world doesn't end before then, which it probably will. So the first DLC they brought out was the Tengu's Disciple, which I thought was a bit of a missed opportunity, because this is set in the same universe as Dead or Alive and Ninja Gaiden, and, you know, those two series have a few Tengu characters. There are a couple of Tengu brothers you fight as bosses in Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2. There's, of course, Bankotsubo, the original Tengu boss from Dead or Alive 2. Then there's Nioh Tengu, who is a playable character in the newer DOAs because, you know, keep the old Tengu moveset, but replace this flabby, doofy-looking motherfucker with a sexy lady. It's Team Ninja. But the titular Tengu is not related to any of those characters. It's just a guardian spirit that is in the form of a Tengu. You don't even fight enemy Karasu Tengus all that much in the DLC, weirdly enough. Those guys seem to show up a lot less in the DLCs than they did in the main game. But Nioh Tengu's backstory, which you get little glimpses of in DOA 6, shows that she was around as far back as the Heian period, so it could have easily included her in either of the DLCs, but sadly they didn't. Not a big loss, but that first DLC was a bit underwhelming. See, it was cool for me because I'm somewhat familiar with some of those historical figures, thanks to Warriors Orochi, you know, because you have Yoshitsune, and I recognize the Taira name, even though Kiyomori is not in it, or maybe he kind of is. Maybe he's one of the bosses. I don't know if I can trust TV tropes, but that's what it says. But as far as the actual content goes, there wasn't much to really say. The most noteworthy thing for me was, other than the fact they added a new weapon, which is a pretty good weapon, the split staff. I find it hilarious that this is the same setting as that Genji game, you know, where the whole, this is real historical Japanese battles. Now here's this giant enemy crab, where that meme came from, and this DLC has giant enemy crabs added as enemies. I'm like, okay, intentional or not, that's hilarious. But that's the only reason that stands out. But then it goes back further, this new DLC, because the main character's going on time travel adventures. So this one goes back to like 920 something, going back a long ways. And you get 3 story missions and about 6, I think, optional missions that you unlock over the course of playing through the main missions. And there's some cool little bits, like at the end of the first mission, you find that the character that's the focus of this DLC actually is accompanied by one of the characters who is one of the trainers for the main character, teaching you how to use the heavier weapons, like the axe. He just shows up because he's alive in this time period, and that's kind of cool. And there's also some really interesting plot reveals about the backstory of the Nioh setting, and I'll get into that later, not quite yet, but there's so much more to this DLC, not just because of the cool fan service that I'll get into in a minute. There's also those plot reveals, and it does a much better job of setting up the next DLC than the first one did to set up the second one. Because I feel that was kind of the challenge that this DLC was always going to face, because the DLC for the first game is just continuing the narrative, and it's the build up to, and then the event of the 2 sieges of Osaka Castle. And so that kind of brings it close to that story. And other than the fact that there was one plot thread hanging to be resolved in Nioh 2, that was a really good continuation for the story. That felt like it actually meant something. Whereas you go to the Nioh 2 DLC, and your main character is going on fucking little adventures through time into the past, and other than, you know, fleshing out the setting and exploring time periods that could have been their own games if they wanted them to be, there's really nothing to that first DLC. It lightly sets up the second one, but the second one does a way better job of setting up the third. From what I understand, we're going to be getting details about the third one in November, I think it's around the 13th or something. It's mid-November. So I really can't wait to see what they're going to do there, especially considering one of the fan servicey bits they added into this one. So I'll talk briefly about the weapon they added, and then I'll get into the stuff that I consider spoilers. Not just plot stuff, but stuff that comes up later in the DLC. And I think if you want to experience the DLC, you absolutely should. So I can definitely recommend Nioh 2. If you're not fond of difficult games, you might not really be into it. If you weren't into Nioh 1, then you probably won't be into this game, but I think it's a genuinely fantastic game. And I'd say it's worth getting the Season Pass just based on this DLC alone, because it shows promise for what the third one could be. And the first one is fine. I don't mean to make it sound like it was bad. It's just, it was kind of what you expect for a DLC. But this one, I feel like they really went above and beyond for it. And it's great. So the new weapon this time is gloves. Gauntlets. Some cool hand-to-hand moves. Some of the animations are fucking sick. Like when you do a stealth attack on a human enemy, your character just like turns around and starts like beating on him. It's like, it reminds me a lot of Kung Lao's throw in MK11, the one that's similar to that bit in Ip Man, where he's just smacking that guy 100,000 times in the chest. It's so good. And there's some really cool weapon designs for the gloves. Like there's a fire element one, an electric one, an ice one. And those elements are part of the actual design. So if you refashion another set, it will look like that, which can lead to some fun. You could, for example, have a fire gauntlet with a fire attribute and then put on the ice element design. It'll be fucking silly. Haha, freezer burn, bitch. It's really fast, even in high stance, which is like the slow, powerful one. With that one especially, you have all these big jump attacks and stuff. It's just really fun to use. I found the split staff was one where it gives you good range, but at the same time, the only move that I really found was particularly useful was the one where it splits and you're swinging it around and you just hold the button down to keep swinging it and it'll just hit the enemy at a decent range and do decent damage. This is just so fun because you're just zipping around all over the place. It's really good, and it's better than I could have possibly expected it to be. And the low stance for it kind of reminds me of the fighting stance for the Mantis style in Deadly Alliance. Oh, also, as well as increasing the level cap, they've also increased the cap on stats so that they go beyond 99 now. And the level cap has gone up to like 500 probably, I don't actually know. And they've also added a 4th difficulty, because I think it was that in the first game, they balanced the DLCs around people who had kept playing the game, which would make it a bit difficult for someone coming in late, playing through the main story and then straight through the DLC, or playing through the main story and then not playing again until the DLC comes out. Because obviously you still want it to be a challenge for the people who kept playing. So the solution here is make it just a bit more difficult than the end of the last bit of content, and then add another difficulty on top of that. And this difficulty, maybe I'm just really underleveled, but holy shit. I couldn't even get through the first fucking stage on this one. It's so difficult. Kind of amazing. So it's good if you want a challenge, but they've also added the last thing to the shrine, which has been just a blank space since launch. And it's this stone that you trade an accessory for, and you kill enemies on a certain difficulty to level up the stone. So when you filled out the gauge, you can exchange it to make the accessory more powerful. Or you can keep going with the stone and increase the level even more, but that'll just make things more difficult for you. I'm not entirely sure how this works, but it's an interesting idea. The few trophies based around it. Oh, and there are also a couple of returning bosses from Nioh 1. Both of which I'm a little unsure about, which I guess it's worth getting into as part of the story spoiler discussion. So if you have intentions of playing this DLC, stop here. If not, then keep going. But I can definitely recommend both the main game and the DLCs. I wouldn't recommend buying just the second one though, because, well, you want more content, don't you? You want access to all the missions, so do it. So, let's discuss the story stuff and the stuff that comes up later in the DLC that I think is pretty neat. First off, I kind of wish I had been recording myself playing it, doing some kind of let's play or even a stream if I was capable of doing that. Because I think people might have enjoyed my reactions to things, because in the second mission you're fighting these ninjas, and I didn't really realize that these were a new type of ninja until I was going through my new equipment that I'd got in my inventory and saw this mask. I was like, oh, new ninja mask. Hang on a minute, rather than a face mask, it's a cloth with a spider web on it. And then the protective metal on over the forehead looks like spider eyes. Like, hang on, is that black spider ninja gear? And yeah, straight up, the enemy ninjas are the Black Spider Ninja clan from Ninja Gaiden. To the point that they even have the claw weapons that the Black Spider Ninjas use as a gauntlet skin. And then the boss of that second mission is just the first boss from Ninja Gaiden 2. The Black Spider Ninja turns into a spider fiend, which pretty much confirms that the fiends and the yokai are the same thing. It's just so cool having this boss from this other game brought over and reworked into these systems. So yeah, good luck beating this guy without the flying swallow, haha. And this is around the point you unlock the side mission that gives you access to the first of the 2 bosses brought back from the first game, and it is Giant Toad. And I feel like Giant Toad could have been used differently. Part of the issue is that this is a time travel plot, so it's not the same Giant Toad that we saw in Nioh 1, because that one was the previous Hattori Hanzo who appears in this game as a human, because Nioh 2 is a prequel. So it's not him, because this is like 700 years ago. So it's not the same Giant Toad, he just happens to fight the exact same way. Still has the spear and the pipe and everything, which we were to believe were specific things related to Hanzo. I don't know, maybe there is some connection there, like Hanzo's supposed to have taken inspiration from this specific yokai, which makes his transformation into it ironic, I guess. Not sure if I did find out how that happened anyway, but... So the Giant Toad, it seemed easier this time. Maybe it's because I'm at the point where I've been leveling through 3 difficulty levels. Got a 4th one now. And I was playing through it the first time on the easiest difficulty, because the enemies didn't pose much of a threat to me generally on that difficulty. But it's possible that they've simply toned him down a bit since the first game, because in the first game, he was one of the toughest bosses in the game, I found. Granted, I wasn't really using Sloth that much in Nioh 1. It's mainly Nioh 2 where I started abusing that. And the second one comes up in the 3rd story mission, where it's, I think it's called White Tiger, which is Nekomata transformed, and I had this feeling of dread the second he started talking about, at the start of the mission, how his eye was starting to throb. I'm like, oh no, please tell me we're not going to have this happen again, because... See, that could have been brought back as a separate yokai, and I think it would have worked, but it's the exact same thing happens. The villain sends those, like, dark spirits or whatever at Hide, which, in gameplay, Hide can just tank, because it doesn't do much. But no, he's like, I'm going to sacrifice myself to save you, and then he gets transformed into a big monster, and then, rather than dying, he gets reverted back to his normal form. That's twice this has happened to him. I don't know, maybe it would have worked better if it had been his past self, like he was hanging around as this big yokai, and you beat him, and he gets turned into what we know as Nekomata. There's ways this could have worked, but I don't think it does. It's just a weird thing to do for the story of this character, especially since the actual fight isn't really worth it. It's an okay fight, it's just, I don't know, it doesn't really feel like what we gained from this decision was worth the weird and kind of awful repetition of what's already happened in the first game. And it kind of takes a lot away from the first one, because the first time it happened in Nioh 1, it's already weakened a bit retroactively by the fact that Nekomata does come back at the end and is just alive. But for him to be transformed again, it's a bit much. And then it's just kind of cements that Seimei is a way better Onmyoji than Tenkai is, because Tenkai couldn't save him. But then you proceed forward and find the real boss, and the main villain of the main game is here, and I'm not quite sure of the implications. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be that he is just the past version of him, and we're going to fight him in the past, or if it's that he survived the events of the main story and has gone back in time like Hide. It's hard to say, especially since the game doesn't really talk about how Hide's presence in the past alters events. Like when you get to the Black Spider boss in the second mission, the other 2 characters who are there get webbed up, and then Hide fights the guy. So would they have been fine if Hide hadn't been around? Presumably, since we later learn that one of those characters is one of the mummified corpses that is used to seal Shuten Doji. And you know, I thought that was actually a really cool touch, the fact that these 2 bodies we see very briefly, you might forget about them because they're only in the cutscene. I don't think the bodies are there during gameplay, and if you've got it set to auto skip the cutscenes that you've already seen, then you might not see it again. But yeah, there are 2 bodies that are sealing Shuten Doji and the Nine-Tailed Fox. And it turns out, yeah, it's these 2 characters. One of them is Seimei, who is sealing the Kyuubi, and Shuten Doji is being sealed by this woman whose name I forget. I'm pretty sure she's one of the Minamoto. And I thought that was a really cool touch. And then you get more missions that presumably are supposed to be set after Hide returns to the present. Because this is always the problem, is when you get these missions that only unlock after you finish the main story of the DLC, but they're clearly still set in that time period. But at the end of the main story mission, Hide gets sent back. That happened last time, where there's a mission where we team up with one of the Date, and that has to have taken place before Hide returns home. But you only unlock it after Hide returns home. And same happens in this one with the secret super boss, Ren Hayabusa. Here I was before the DLC came out thinking, well, what if in the 3rd DLC they gave us another Hayabusa ancestor? Because we had Jin Hayabusa last time. What if they gave us another one? And the mad lads, they fucking did it. And Ren has the claws from Ninja Gaiden 2, as well as the Dragon Sword, and you get those for beating him, as well as the Izuna drop for the claws and the sword. And you also get the Fire Ninpo from Ninja Gaiden 2. And you can get bits of his armor, if you can get the whole set. But his outfit, rather than being as Jin's was, based on the classic Ninja Gaiden outfit, this one is based on the modern Ninja Gaiden outfit, but with a few samurai flourishes references thrown in. And it's cool, but I think it could have been, well, it would have been cooler for me if they had gone through reviews past outfits in Dead or Alive and Ninja Gaiden, found a costume and said, this costume now represents this other Hayabusa. So, for example, in DOA 2, he had this, or at least in Ultimate, he had this brown ninja gear where he had like the cloth instead of the proper face mask. And I think that could have worked as a really cool one, as like a ninja of this time period, and it's an ancestor of Ryu. But yeah, it's a cool fight. I can't say if it's tougher than Jin because I didn't level much higher than like the level recommended for fighting Jin in Nioh 1, whereas in Nioh 2 I've continued playing the game so much that I far out-level that mission. But he still puts up a hell of a fight. I can imagine he could genuinely be one of the tougher fights in the game if it was around the right level for it and not just stomping him. But that's got me thinking. See, they put Jin in the third DLC for Nioh 1, the last one. And that mission is unlocked when you beat the final boss. You beat the Nine-Tailed Fox, and then you get to fight Jin. So Jin is the last challenge of Nioh 1. But Nioh 2 has the Hayabusa fight in the second DLC. So it would be really weird if they had something that cool and fanservice-y in the second one and then had nothing to follow up with in the third one. So there must be something else, right? I doubt it'll be another Hayabusa. I feel like if they were going to do that, they would have had one in each of the DLCs. What I reckon they're going to do instead is, one, as someone else suggested, maybe an ancestor of the Mugen Tenshin from DOA, so this character could be using like Kasumi and Hayate moves, with the fucking Torn Sky Blast as a move you'd be able to unlock. Or alternatively, it will relate to William. Because William is interesting because you fight him in the main story of Nioh 2, but you know, your character's like possessed, so they're not in the right state of mind, and the fight doesn't have a proper conclusion. William just delivers a severe blow, which releases Hide from the possession. And that raises the question of which of the two is actually the toughest. Normally, when there is some doubt, like with, say, Tadakatsu or Muneshige, that character would then challenge the protagonist to a proper duel. So we've had those. But Nioh 2 didn't do that with William. It remains completely ambiguous as to which of the two is the tougher fighter. And I kind of prefer it that way. I'd rather we not get a definitive answer. I feel like the best they could do with it is if they added a mission where you play as William as well, and so you could do it from either perspective. But I feel like the best we could expect for that is if they did, like, on PS5 and Xbox Series X, a new port of Nioh that combines both games into one, and you play as both William and Hide in the game, and then you can do missions involving both of them from either perspective. That's the best I could see them doing. I'd rather be ambiguous about it, but one way they could get around it, theoretically, is by having William have an ancestor. Now, it might be a bit weird to say, oh yeah, William's ancestor was also in Japan at some point, but not necessarily any reason the DLC has to take place in Japan. But if they gave us William's ancestor, or perhaps if Hide travels into the future and encounters William's son Joseph, all grown up, you know, you can have a William-esque fight without definitively saying that William is weaker than Hide because he lost. I'm also kind of curious about the timeline because historically William Adams died in 1620 and the epilogue of Nioh 2 is set in 1617. So, you know, they don't even address the fact that Ieyasu died the previous year, but William theoretically only has 3 years left. So maybe they'll address that in this next DLC, because I don't think they've even confirmed that the next DLC will have a time travel component, but I believe in the main story, there was a bit that I recognised immediately as hints towards the DLCs, visions of 3 characters using that sword that Hide has, the dagger that becomes a sword, and I can't go back to check because I don't remember which cutscene it was, but I know there were 3 characters there, and that's obviously set up for the third one, so probably going to be another time travel adventure, probably again into the past, but it could be into the future. There's no reason to assume that Hide didn't have visions of the future. Who knows, maybe the sword will get corrupted and become the Dark Dragon Blade from Ninja Gaiden 1, and it's all going to tie together. But yeah, I think that's enough of me rambling. I've been at this for half an hour. This DLC is fantastic. The game itself is fantastic. I can definitely recommend both. This DLC was a huge step up from the first one. You know, it had its moments, but this one's just got so much more cool Ninja Gaiden fan service and has a bunch of stuff that at least has implications for the main story. All this stuff that reveals, oh yeah, that's who these 2 corpses were. Honestly, at first I thought what they were going to do was reveal that the human antagonist of the DLC was supposed to be the past version of the main villain. Because it did seem like they were going to go that way, based on what I could recall of his backstory. But then, no, it's just that he's possessed by that guy. Although maybe the idea is supposed to be that he dies there and becomes that yokai. I don't know. Probably not. But the fact they've gone back to the stuff with Shuten Doji and the Nine-Tailed Fox makes me wonder, because I know they don't do this anymore, because in Nioh 1 had a bunch of side missions where you fight multiple bosses at once, and they were not fun. But I wonder, because they had a mission in this one where you get to fight all the Guardians of this time period, one after the other. So I wonder, are they planning to do something like that in the next DLC? Will they bring back the Nine-Tailed Fox boss fight and have you fight that, Shutendoji, and the other one whose name I forget, all in order, because they're meant to be like the 3 most powerful yokai, even though Shutendoji is a fucking pushover compared to the other 2. Is that what they're going to do? Are they going to have you fight all 3 of them in one mission? It wouldn't surprise me. I thought it was really cool, actually, the fact that when you fight Shutendoji in this DLC, in one of the side missions, you have an AI companion with you the whole time. I think the only other time they've done that is with Yukimura fighting the Nine-Tailed Fox in Nioh 1. I don't recall any other time when you have an AI companion helping you against a boss. Normally, you have to do that yourself. It's one of the things I thought would have made the final boss fight of the main story way cooler if William was helping you out. So maybe we'll get something like that here. Maybe William will help out in the next DLC. Can't wait for November to find out more about this DLC. It's good to know Koei Tecmo is releasing something that's not a huge, embarrassing failure. Dynasty Warriors 9 or Persona 5 Scramble that's still not got a Western release confirmed, announced, anything. Come on, guys, get with it. It's kind of weird how Nioh 2 has such incredible quality, and then you compare that to the recent Dead or Alive output from Team Ninja, and you're like, what the hell happened? Why is that so trash? DOA should just get a descendant of William added into the game using the fists as the basis for a moveset. Yeah, I think that's everything. Go away now.
正か邪か見極めさせてもらう。その程度。がまだだ。見事。その曇りなき刃、邪のなしうる技にあらず。